Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Now, Thomas, before we get started today, would you please not yell in the microphone, okay? Because I know this subject is going to really get you worked up, but we have a full disclosure report for you. You will see the link at the, underneath the YouTube box, and of course, you're going to want to read it because you're going to want to know the details that Thomas is going to tell you. But we're here today to talk about the invasion, the alien invasion. Yes, they are here. Thomas, what in the world do you mean?
Well, first off, Betsy, I just want to apologize for yelling, but I do get worked up because these things are very upsetting, but the beauty of almost everything we present is we show a simple solution. And before I get started scaring people, which I have been accused of lately, of being a scary person, I just want to say that it can be solved very, very simply by doing what Trump is already doing, which is enforcing the rule of law. So what I'm about to tell you, yes, there is and has been during the entire Obama administration.
Well, even before then, too.
Well, yes, before then, too, but in a very focused way, especially since 2011, when he ran up against a wall and he watched the Congress fail miserably to enact some Chuck Schumer-generated Democratic attempts at restructuring immigration. It does need to be restructured. We have no border. When you look at the statistics in this report, you will be shocked because what we did is we didn't go back to just the government reports. We went back to all the reports and we looked at all of them. And then we synthesized it. So what we're showing you are statistics that you will not find in very many places. For instance, remember, they have been saying DACA, the deferred it's a deferred deportation is really what it really is. DACA is what we're discussing with this budget issue and this debate that closed down the government because Schumer wouldn't bend. So what is DACA? We need to look at it. That's an Obama executive policy which told Homeland Security, the Department of the Interior, and the U.S. Immigration Office to basically do not deport these illegals. And he called them DACA, and they're called Dreamers because earlier on there was the Dreamer Act, which did not get passed. And every act in the last 10 years that has been put forward in Congress has not gotten the approval, so it couldn't go forward.
Well, but before you go on, let's make it really obvious what people are thinking, which is kind of like a duh. The reason that the name was, they changed this name to Dreamers is because we had previously called them illegal aliens. That's what they are. They're illegal aliens, people. But if you call them Dreamers, then it has a soft approach. And of course, you don't want to harm people who are dreaming, all people who dream. So it's just a wordsmithing technique to get us away from the real focus of what we should be looking at, which is illegal alien immigration invasion.
Yes, these names, Dreamers, DACA, DAPA, and all the other different ones are just really virtue signaling, isn't it? It's trying to say that we are really trying to help these poor, innocent, sweetheart children. Well, let's look at what that is.
It's to cover up the invasion that they're actively involved in.
It is absolutely that. Betsy,
this is an information war. That's what we keep preaching here at the American Intelligence Media. And the information that most people are being fed is not correct because of the corrupt propaganda media that's been feeding us lies, which, by the way, I keep saying, we the people need to hold them accountable. We need to sue these media companies for these lies. I am off my topic. Go back to DACA, DAPA.
Well, that's okay. It's the kind of yellow journalism, propaganda, political falsehood that we see all the time. So DACA, it's anything but DACA, which is, they have names that you can't even understand because they're trying to obfuscate the reality. Mm-hmm. So it's a deferred action for childhood arrivals. No, it's anything but that. Deferred action, you mean you're going to break the laws of deportation, Mr. Obama? And childhood arrivals, they weren't childhood arrivals. They were snuck into the country here by their illegal immigrant alien parents.
Don't even call them immigrants.
Felons. They are felons. Yes. They are criminals.
These are invaders. They're not immigrants.
6 million people are lined up to get into this country legally at any one moment. About 1.5 million get in legally a year. These people snuck in because, first off, Obama abnegated his duty to protect our borders and secure them for Americans. He basically has turned them over to anyone who wants to walk across the border. If they happen to be a pregnant woman and have the baby here, then the baby becomes an anchor baby, which is illegal, by the way, and is... You saw when the anchor baby issue arose that the Congress cannot decide on anything about what is constitutional with immigrants and what is not. That's the issue. That's the reason that Schumer and the Democratic gang tried to sneak into the budget an amendment, a section, which was an illegal law, which they were going to act as if they passed this law and they debated it in Congress and the Senate, which they didn't. And the law would basically say we give complete amnesty to these people that Obama has basically completely capriciously assigned as DACA, because he chose a date, and from this date to that date, he decided those people are DACA. He decided to ignore their illegal felons' parents. These are people who snuck into this country, refused to register, have been working illegally. They went and got a state license. They went and got a state ID, and they got a job. And in many cases, they're paying taxes, all illegally. How could you accept taxes from someone who wasn't a citizen of the United States? Plus, they couldn't do anything to stop Obama because this was nothing more than an executive policy decision, and it was an order given to agencies which he controls. So it was a form of basically deferring deportation, but basically looking like the possibility of amnesty. So when he says dreamers, it wasn't a dream that he promised all these people that he was going to give them amnesty. Also, if he gave them amnesty, then what was the next thing he did? And by the way, when he brought about this policy maneuver, it was taken to court by 27 states, and they won. And they said that it was unconstitutional, illegal, and wrong. So they took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, because Judge Scalia had been...
murdered.
Oh,
Let's just call it out.
Well, I was
a Supreme
trying
Court
to hold my
judge
tongue.
goes off to some place where it looks like, with the pictures we see, some major pedophilia, human trafficking kind of issues like that may have been occurring. He gets offed, and there is no autopsy. Oh, we're going to be revisiting that when we get this house cleaned in Washington.
Yeah, pillow over his head, suffocated.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't look into any of that, seeing that the 4-4 Supreme Court vote allowed, because it didn't stay the order, it allowed
the last court's ruling to stand.
The stupid DACA permission given by a lower court.
But they had to off Scalia in order to get that 4-4 vote.
Well, also, once Scalia was gone, there were many things that Obama did. But let's look into just the immigration here for a second. So in case anybody looked up from the DACA document and said, hey, what about the parents of these illegal felons? Then Obama immediately with that Supreme Court vote of basically allowing him to continue this illegal activity, he expanded it, not only for more DACA people, but for their parents. And then he ignored the parents that were already here that were illegal, which he knew because he has the children who registered, 800,000 of them registered and paid $500 to Obama. That's the reason they couldn't stop DACA, is it wasn't funded out of a budget. It was a self-funding, stupid illegal program of executive overreach trying to do the work of the Congress. Only the Congress can pass laws concerning immigration. Obama doesn't like anybody stopping him, so he just did whatever he wanted. And his lawlessness was every single day of 8 years. Remember, he bombed foreign countries without the approval of Congress every single day that he was in office. 7 countries. Don't get me started on that. But that's what happened with Europe. Obama bombed these countries, killed 2 million people with Hillary's help. 56 million people became refugees, and those were, of course, Syrian refugees, Afghanistan refugees, Afghani refugees. Those would, of course, be Syrian refugees, Afghani refugees, Iraqi refugees, refugees from Yemen, from Somalia, from Sudan, all the places that he was at war with them without having any congressional approval for being at war. Those refugees then were allowed, with the UN's, United Nations approval, to basically invade Europe. Now, ask yourself the question, where do the boats come from? Where does the money for the boats to move them come from?
I know that.
Where does the food and the water come from, which you never, ever, ever saw a single Red Cross anyone delivering anything to these people?
You want the Red Cross involved. I've got questions about them.
Now, remember that every refugee, the Pope, through his relief funds, Catholic relief funds, gets money for every refugee. The United Nations gets paid $24 billion by the United States alone for a refugee program each year, which Trump just ended. So who fed them? Yes, Betsy, tell them who fed them.
Yeah, it's George Soros.
Thank you very much. One man who owes America right now because of his tax-free hedge fund in Caracas, he owes America $86 billion. So when he just took $18 billion and pumped it into his Open Society and Tides Foundation work and the 184 different NGOs that are given money through that George Soros Foundation, those foundations, that $18 billion went into basically left-wing Democratic, already supported, Obama-supported, from money stolen from the government, given to those NGOs. And I could go into that too and justify what I just said, but believe me, he had many ways of taking money and shuffling it in to organizations that supported strong Democratic, left-wing, basically fascist groups like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, on and on and on.
Oh, well, don't forget the MS-13 gangs, too.
Oh, well,
all of this was put in place to disrupt America. You see, people...
He brought them in on purpose.
Listen, you've got to remember that Obama and Hillary were students of Cloward-Piven, Saul Alinsky, all coming out of the University of Chicago. Their intent, clear as can be, was to overthrow the United States of America government. And they've been working on this plan for quite some time. We have seen it peak at the very time that Hillary was going to finally take office and put the final clamp down on America. Thank goodness for all the patriots out there that voted and gave us pause for a change. But folks, we can't just rely on President Trump to get this done. We have to do this because we want to do it. There are things that you can do. For example, this YouTube, push it out to your friends, into your social network. Remember, the articles are attached too. If your readership prefers articles, let them read the articles. If you're an alt media creator, first tier alt media creator, and we've got so many that follow our site, go ahead and create your own narrative, your own way of communicating this vital information to your audience. This is what we call Operation Information Rapid Deployment. So we need all hands on deck. These are not dreamers. Oh, the Pope would like you to think that this is all a good thing and everything's good. We want these people to have a great life, but they need, now that they have a taste of what it was in America, they need to go back to their home countries and start making changes in their own country to make it a better place for everybody.
What Angela Merkel did for Europe is basically to what looks to be destroy Europe by a Muslim invasion of Europe, which will take over their Christian beliefs, take over their countries, and except for Hungary and Poland and a few other countries that have resisted it, they are being overwhelmed. Some countries have already thrown in the towel and said that their social service system is broken because of the millions and millions of invading Muslim migrants into Europe. Look it up yourself if you want.
Invasion.
2% of them are working.
Those are their foot soldiers. You see, even the globalists have to have an army. And, of course, we've written quite extensively how our own military-industrial complex is used to that end. But these are the foot soldiers for the globalists to take over countries all over the world.
George Soros sweeps in when there's chaos, destabilizes, rapes, and pillages economically with terrorism beyond imagination. He's done this to 14 countries through 14 color revolutions. He's going to do it to the European Union. He's going to do it to every country that he can, and he's already trying it in America, and he was pretty far along in terms of accomplishing his mission, and then Trump got elected, just as you say, and that upset the apple cart. But just like Angela Merkel will be seen as the person who created the demise of European culture, Obama will not have, his legacy will be a very bad legacy, and it will be exactly what we're saying. He came in and during 8 years dismantled everything that he could touch, whether it was the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing propaganda and the Department of Defense inside of our own borders, whether it be terrible trade deals, whether it be the climate accord that would have lost us $5 trillion or the Iranian nuclear scandal. I mean, we have basically, through Obama, funded Hezbollah, Hamas. We funded the Wahhabis. We funded the Salafists. We funded all the terrorists. We created ISIS. $1 billion a year he gave to the ISIS in Syria alone, just one faction. So is it surprising that for 8 years he did everything he could to dismantle all immigration? He let the borders be lax. He told them to catch and release. He basically told the world, bring your children to our borders. And even though they may die in crossing the desert when they're abandoned by their parents in Mexico, and many of them did die, as soon as they get here, we're going to take care of them like they're kings. Don't you worry about it. And then you can come visit and you can stay too. Visit on a visa and then you can stay too.
And in the meantime, we have veterans that are homeless on the street. They don't have the proper medical coverage. And that Obama spent money on this instead of our military servicemen and women and veterans. It's enough to make you sick to your stomach.
His 100,000 refugees that he brought in, almost all being Muslim, very few of them anything else but Muslim. He wanted to make it 500,000 a year. He was pushing for that at the end. He brought in 100,000 a year. Those families, and by the way, they get to follow Sharia law. One man, one Muslim, brought in 9 wives and 27 children. Because of that, he was paid $250,000 a year to take care of his family, and then he said he couldn't work because he was too busy taking care of his family.
Money that could go to schools, to veterans, to roads.
Mind you, immigrants, illegal aliens come into this country, and though we know that their children are illegal aliens, we must give them medical care and education. And in education, we must provide everything in the language that they have brought over the border with them, though they are illegal and should be turned in and deported because they are in fact felons and they are stealing because they're stealing entitlement funds, they're stealing education funds, they're stealing state and federal funds. Plus, we treat some of them, like the Pope wants to say, that all migrants they're like angels. We have to kiss their feet and wash their feet. They're the best thing that ever happened.
But the Pope is making big money off of them.
$588 billion a year the Pope makes off of these refugees. Okay, so it's his biggest business. When we just stopped the $24 billion to the UN, did you see how he got so upset and angry that he's blowing it now? He went down to South America. He should have never returned to South America because they rioted. They burnt churches. They threatened to kill him. And he was rejected in a number of countries that he went to.
That you've talked about quite extensively.
It's Marxism, and this type of Jesuit liberation theology is nothing more than severe Marxist, socialist, Catholic communism. And that's why he promotes, and that's why he wants America to have open borders. That's why he thinks we should accept everyone. And then imagine how people are convinced of this. They don't understand. Here's what's really going on. We have DACA, which is 3.6 million, not 800,000, liar Chuck Schumer and all the Democrats. It came out the truth. The truth before they voted on it came out. 3.6 that they know of. Okay, there's 800,000 receiving the direct benefits. Of those 3.6 DACA, they have birthed 400,000 children who now could be considered anchor babies. So whether we want to or not, because of the Obama interpretation and other people, because it won't be questioned and taken to the Supreme Court to actually make a determination on anchor babies. Okay, 400,000 DACA have anchor babies. Okay, 3.6 DACA. That means there's how many parents of DACA? There's estimates. There's estimates, and the estimates are, at least 2 million or above. So DACA is not DACA. DACA is DACA children and DACA parents.
It's the future voters of the Democrat Party, if not all of them at this point, are the ones that are, of age, are voting not just one time. We've got them. We've got them bussing into different states down in Alabama during that election.
70% of them go to 6 states. 5 of those states are Democratic.
And
the other state, they only go to the cities that are sanctuary cities. So these cities are all Democratic cities. Okay? This isn't hard to follow, but that isn't the whole story. Let me just finish this. You got DACA, and then you got DAPA. DAPA is 4.5 4.5 illegal aliens that were allowed to come in. Million, what did I say? 4.4 million.
4.5 million.
And those are anyone who's here, who's naturalized or an American, because of DAPA, could have their parents come over immediately and they become citizens. 4.4 million. No one's counting them. And no one's counting that they're older, they're not working, and they're given all kinds of benefits that you can't even imagine. Then you have, as I said, 1.5 million legal ones in a lineup of 6 million trying to get in. So what they do? They simply get a visa. How many visas do we give out a year? About 800,000 visas to immigrants trying to get in for a green card. Over 42% of them stay beyond the end of their visa. So if you get a visa, half of them are staying. And then you got 10 million other visas, okay? And those 10 million other visas go to everything imaginable, and we made a list of them. But some of them are simply for Republicans. They're the cheap labor that some Republicans live off of.
Well, remember, when we look at this, we have to see that there are Republicans and Democrats behind this, because we're really talking about globalists. Remember, it's about globalism and nationalism. Do you want to protect your borders and your language and your culture? Well, the globalists certainly don't want to see that. So they've got to have their foot soldiers and their voters to overthrow America, and then it becomes a free-for-all and the globalists win. So that's why it's so important that we do not allow Congress to vote on this without everybody making sure your Congress people are fully aware of the real numbers that Thomas has outlined here for you.
There was a scandal back in the 70s where they found out that most of the Republicans in Washington, D.C. have a domestic in their home. And that domestic is an illegal alien. And then they followed it back to their states, and they found that, yes, in their multi-million-dollar homes, which they somehow purchased being on the small salary of being a congressman or a senator, they also had domestics in the home who were illegal aliens. And so it became so huge that they said, we are not going to prosecute it within the confines of Washington, D.C. proper. In other words, they allowed it. And so we are talking about the fact that both Democrats and Republicans really want them, but Democrats want them more because the recent study done by Vice President Pence on the election fraud asked 17 states to voluntarily send in their reports, and they found between 3.5 million and 4.5 million fraudulent votes in 17 states that voluntarily sent it in, and those were not the Democratic states. So we are probably looking at least 10, 15 million fraudulent voters, and more than likely above 20 million illegal aliens in this country, because when they use the census to ask voluntarily, how many illegal alien felons do you have in your house? What answer do you think the people are going to give? So the information is very conservative estimates. So we went with what are considered to be more accurate estimates, and even they are conservative. So when you see these numbers, you may be a bit shocked. But what we're trying to point out is during his entire administration, he dismantled the immigration policies, procedures, knocked down our borders, allowed anyone to come into this country, advertised to the whole world that if you can get here, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect your civil rights, even though you're not a citizen and you don't have any civil rights here. Basically, as a visitor, especially U.S. civil rights and constitutional rights, I'm going to allow people to come in with who believe in Sharia law, who have 9 wives. That's what Obama did. And then at the end, he started forcing the idea of amnesty for all aliens in America.
Well, you can be sure if Hillary had been in, that exactly what would have happened.
It was all set up. They would have waved their wand. They would have all gotten amnesty. But what happened? Trump came in, and he is tripping them all up as the steamroller, as the wrecking ball, as the absolutely technologically disruptive force that he is. He's making all of them run and jump over the wall, because he's already reinforced the wall. He's already strengthened the wall while they were busy discussing the wall. He's already taken care of DACA because he showed the world that he has a heart. He'll consider the dreamers. No, he won't, because he knows that it will never pass through Congress, and he knows that it is illegal to tack it onto a budget. So it has to stand alone. And when it does, he's not going to sign that. It's not going to provide the $20 billion for the wall that he needs. It's not going to provide the adjustments of getting rid of chain migration, getting rid of lotteries, getting rid of the people who are coming in being paid much less than our people. Remember, every one of those working DACA people, all 800,000, have taken a U.S. citizen's job. Don't forget that. So we have an invasion, but the invasion has been stopped by our president, Donald J. Trump. The reason he stopped it? Because it was destroying America. How did he stop it? By enforcing the rule of law, the same way that he's stopping all of this corruption that had turned Washington, D.C. into a lawless pit of vipers, alligators, snakes, and other vile creatures.